just 6 minutes of time, a small, slender wooden boat powered by 8 men will cover 2,000 meters on the water. Each man will consume roughly 8 liters of oxygen per minute, whereas the average healthy adult male can only consume about 4 liters per minute. When they're done, the men in the boat will have exerted the same amount of energy as having played 2 full-length college basketball games back to back. And all this in under 6 minutes. When you think about it, there's not a lot of glamour in rowing crew. It's a sport that requires intense physical discipline, a unique combination of raw stamina and power, and the mental toughness to push through excruciating pain. For those who row, pain marks only the beginning of the race. Beyond the physical, the sport requires a high degree of intelligence and an almost mystical ability for 8 men to work in perfect harmony for 6 minutes of total exertion. Sure, you're on a body of water, but mostly you just stare at the back of the guy in front of you. One guy in front faces the others and gives the cadence. As anyone who's ever sat upon the rowing machine at the gym can attest, even 1 minute at a moderate level of exertion is enough to leave you completely gassed. 1 minute at full effort for the uninitiated, on the other hand, will make you want to puke. As the famous boat builder and crewman George Yeoman Pocock once said, quote, "In a sport like this, hard work, not much glory, but still popular in every century, well, there must be some beauty which ordinary men can't see, but extraordinary men do," end quote. Pocock had devoted himself to the perfection of building boats and the men who drove them across the water, and in turn had become obsessed with the philosophical ideal of men operating in complete brotherly love on a single, unified endeavor. Later in life, he would build boats for the University of Washington and help inspire a generation of crewmen. Like the other coaches on the team, the British-trained oarsman, quote, sometimes spoke of life-transforming experiences. He held out the prospect of becoming part of something larger than themselves, of finding in themselves something they did not yet know they possessed, of growing from boyhood to manhood. At times, he dropped his voice a bit and shifted his tone and cadence and talked of near mystical moments on the water, moments of pride, elation, and deep affection for one's fellow oarsmen. Moments they would remember, cherish, and recount to their grandchildren when they were old men. Moments even that would bring them nearer to God, end quote. Pocock's influence would pay off in dramatic fashion. In 1936, Joe Rance and 9 other men who rowed crew for the University of Washington won the gold medal at the Olympics in Germany. Many of the young men came from such impoverished and hard-scrabble Depression-era circumstances that it hardly seemed the bunch would stack up against elite rowing crews from around the world. And yet, to the surprise of everyone except perhaps their coach, the working-class men from Seattle pulled off a stunning upset. Rowing events had been dominated by the host nation, as German teams medaled in every single event and took home 5 of 7 gold medals. Yet in the final race, the men's 8s, or 8-man rowing, the American boys managed to close with thundering pace, outsprinting 2 other teams with only a second separating the top 3 finishers. Many years later, as Joe Rance was in the last days of his life, author Daniel James Brown paid him a visit. He wanted to tell the story of the boys from Washington who captured gold in Hitler's Germany. As they talked about Joe's tumultuous upbringing in the midst of the Great Depression and the many adversities he faced in life, Joe recounted the story as a newspaperman would. Just the facts, very little emotion. Rance agreed to help with the book under one condition. It could not be about him, but about the boys in the boat. When they started to talk about Joe's career with Washington's crew team, Rance's words would become increasingly saturated with deep feeling. From time to time, this tough-as-nails man who'd hewn timber with his own hands, lived in desolate coal mining towns, and faced life's many obstacles with stoic resolve, would pause to cry. As Brown describes the conversation, quote, Rance talked about learning the art of rowing, about shells and oars, about tactics and techniques. He reminisced about long, cold hours on the water under steel gray skies, about smashing victories and defeats narrowly averted, about traveling to Germany and marching under Hitler's eyes into the Olympic Stadium in Berlin, and about his crewmates. None of these recollections brought him to tears, though. It was when he tried to talk about the boat that his words began to falter and tears welled up in his bright eyes. At first, I thought he meant the Husky Clipper, the racing shell in which he had rode his way to glory. Or did he mean his teammates, the improbable assemblage of young men who had pulled off one of rowing's great achievements? Finally, watching Joe struggle for composure over and over, I realized that the boat was something more than just the shell or its crew. To Joe, it encompassed but transcended both. It was something mysterious and almost beyond definition. It was a shared experience, a singular thing that had unfolded in a golden sliver of time long gone, when 9 good-hearted young men strove together, pulled together as one, gave everything they had for one another, bound together forever by pride and respect and love. Joe was crying, at least in part, for the loss of that vanished moment, but much more, I think, for the sheer beauty of it, end quote. And that was an excerpt from that book, The Boys in the Boat, by Daniel James Brown. Rance had learned from Pocock and Ulbrichtson about the glorious and near mystical experience of becoming one with his fellow oarsmen in pursuit of a single goal. Even the recollection of that moment, a rare moment of perfection on a team of men, had brought tears to Joe so many years later. He had learned to live not for himself alone, but for the boys in the boat. Together, they had done something remarkable. A group of poor kids from the hard times of the Depression had won gold on a world stage. In an age like ours, it's an experience of togetherness that few men ever get to experience. Years later, Phil Jackson would say something very similar about his run as coach with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. In his book, 11 Rings, Jackson talks about the kind of leadership required to motivate and equip a group of high-achieving men to accomplish championship greatness. When he took the job, Jackson said the biggest challenge was convincing Jordan that winning scoring titles and MVPs paled in comparison to winning a championship, something Jordan had never experienced. When he first started working with Michael, Phil would say, "Michael, there's no I in the word team," to which Jordan would respond, "Yes, but there is an I in win." Disclosing his source of inspiration, Phil references the book Tribal Leadership. In the book, the authors describe 5 levels of a tribe, ranging from dysfunctional Tribe 1 to highly functional Tribe 5. Getting from Tribe 1 to Tribe 5 is largely about replacing the me with a we, and this task requires what the authors of the book call tribal leadership. Eventually, Michael would buy into Jackson's triangle offense, which distributed the ball and the points to other players and in turn made it impossible for teams to simply double or even triple team Jordan himself. As a result, the team thrived, winning 6 championships. What the players would later describe was the same thing that stirred Joe Rance to tears. They'd come to know the deep power and the bond of the team. No longer was it about any individual player saying, "I'm great," but about a cohesive whole saying, "We're great, and we're doing great things." The leader's job, as Phil demonstrated, was bringing together talented individuals and getting them to buy into a system that would elevate them to unstoppable greatness. More than anything, Phil was able to motivate, inspire, and often diplomatically get players like Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, and Michael Jordan to play together as one mystical living organism. Jackson would often quote Rudyard Kipling to his men. "Now this is the law of the jungle, as old and true as the sky. And the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break must die. As the creeper that girdles the tree trunk, the law runneth forward and back, for the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack." Central for Jackson as a leader was the cultivation of a deep bond of joy that can only come from the pursuit of a unified goal. People, he discovered, are bound together by this deep sense of connectedness. Kobe Bryant, one of Phil's other pupils, once said, "We've been through so many battles, the trust naturally grows. The more wars you fight together, the more you understand the people you're in battle with. One breath, one mind, one spirit." This kind of joy, Phil wrote, is contagious and impossible to fake. With enthusiasm, you find you don't have to do it all yourself. In fact, there's nothing significant you can do by yourself. Sustained enthusiasm brings into existence a wave of creative energy, and all you have to do then is ride the wave. If we're to build the new Christendom, it will take great tribes and great tribal leaders. Men like Jackson, Ulbrichtson, or Pocock, who can motivate, challenge, and organize men around incredible missions. The truth is, the work is too great for any one man. But there's hope buried in that reality. See, God loves to use small tribes of courageous men to reshape the world. Our work is aimed at cultivating the kind of tribe that, having experienced the intoxicating heights of a greatness shared together, no longer says, I'm great, but we're great and we're doing great things. In Ogden, this is at the heart of what we're building, a Christian borough. And in contrast to many institutions or movements from the past where one great man aspires to wield near totalizing influence on every aspect of his community and culture, we're a group of mostly ordinary men pursuing great things together. The strength of the wolf is the pack. By himself, no single man is all that impressive, not really. But together, we have the opportunity to do great things that leave a lasting impact for generations to come. In pursuit of this aim, we believe that calling and training and cultivating tribal leaders is essential to the success of the Ogden Borough. In this episode, we wanted to talk about some of the core principles that shape how we think about leadership and the process of raising up new leaders in our midst. We'll talk about our leadership guild, what raw materials we look for in future leaders, and what we're doing to grow as a leadership team at Refuge and New Christendom Press. The King's Hall podcast exists to make self-ruled men who rule well and win the world.
Well, welcome to this episode of the King's Hall podcast, and joined today by Pastor Brian Sauvé, the always young Frenchman.
Oh, thank you. I want to be forever young.
Dude.
We can cut that out in post.
No.
Put a manlier song.
You leave that in, we harmonize.
Dude, we
no
absolutely
auto-tune
are.
required.
No, we don't need it. Not us.
We don't need auto-tune. Pastor Dan Burkholder, I was going to say still on paternity leave, but I've decided to call it patriarchy leave.
He's on patriarchy leave.
He has now sired, I think, 17 sons.
Only sons.
And they require much. They are a wild bunch.
They require meats and activities and weaponry.
Yes. Yeah. So congratulations to Pastor Dan. Hope to have him back with us shortly.
Great news here at the New Christendom Press warehouse. Lexi Sauvé's book, My Beautiful Wife, Wisdom on Her Tongue, it's in stock and shipping. Look at our team go here. Totally not child labor, an elite team of fulfillment experts getting these books out to you. And what that means is that if you order this book, it's going to be in the mail and to you within like a week or so. Pick up a copy today at newchristendompress.com/wisdom. We're killing it right now. Okay. We're going to keep on dancing.
Brian, we're continuing this series on Christian boroughs. And one of the things that we were talking about last time that we promised our listeners, dear listeners,
Yeah, we promised
that we would address is sort of the leadership question.
Yeah.
One of the things I do think, you spoke about it in the cold open, that is so unique about what we're doing in Ogden, I think is this idea that not only teams and men and tribe, but in particular, you've said something in the past that the closer you get, you want it to look better, not worse.
Yeah.
Whereas for a lot of groups, it's like it looks really good far away.
Yeah.
But you get closer and you see a lot of problems. We've tried to deal with that. God's brought a lot of opportunity for sanctification.
Always.
But why is this issue of team, brotherhood, tribe, men working together, why is this concept so important to the task that we have underway?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot in the last episode in the work of building Christian boroughs about like just we referenced it over and over. We have to understand the way God made the world and then live at peace with the way that God made the world. This is what it means to follow the law in many ways. It's understanding the moral law that God wove into the world and then living at peace with it, not trying to be joyful and satisfied and build a harmonious human society where everybody murders each other.
Yeah.
Like you're not just doing something with physical stuff in that scenario, you're breaking a law that God wove into the fabric of the immaterial and the material. So one of those laws, and we referenced it again last episode, has to do with leadership, with hierarchy, with the distribution of gifts, with how societies are ordered. And what you find inevitably when you look at the world, and whether you zoom all the way in to even something like an individual human being and how that individual human being needs to rule and order his own self, the various parts of his own self, where he needs to rule over his spirit well in order to say, spirit, you will go and now obey God and be a glory. You zoom out to a family where there's a husband, father, there are children, there's a helper, a mother, there are children under both. You zoom out to a clan, and you zoom out to a city-state, and you zoom out to a nation, and you zoom out to an empire, all the way up to God's very throne. You find that God built hierarchy, leadership, submission, love, self-sacrifice. There's all of these various elements, competence, loyalty, skill. There's all of these different things that he put there in the world that govern human relationships and societies in harmonious or unharmonious ways, disharmonious ways. And what leadership is figuring out those hierarchies, how the rules God wrote for them, and then figuring out how to live at peace with them in the world and in your organizations. And that's why it's genuinely so difficult to create the kind of thing that the closer you get, the better it is. Marketing is not that hard. Like, people have figured marketing out. You can make anything look good from a distance. It's like they call China like the 100-foot city or something like that. I'm probably getting that wrong, but the idea is things in China look good from 100 feet away or further. But when you get close, you're like, oh, that's poor workmanship. That's falling apart. That veneer wasn't put on the building right. Like, the outside of this building looks great, but the inside is squalid. And I'm not, this wasn't like a Dunk on China episode necessarily, but that's, I think, what a lot of human endeavors can be. The family that looks really good from a distance, but then you get closer and you find out that there's coldness between the husband and wife. The church that looks great from a distance, and then you find out that it was all sermon editing, videos, and social media.
Well, even I think we've kind of grown up with this in the church. My heroes growing up, a lot of them have kind of fallen into shambles or disrepute. Think of somebody like Steve Lawson, where I remember for years people would say to me, this is the ideal, is to be like this guy. It all falls apart, of course, within the last year. But then you start digging, and it's like, here's a guy who's like, the authority on the elder board is questionable. It doesn't seem like he reports to anyone.
Yeah.
It's actually not a biblical pattern going on at the roots.
They weren't obeying that law that God wove into creation.
Now, part of it is I think you could get jaded, and you could say, none of these projects will work.
Yeah.
Anything you try to build is just going to blow up like that.
Yeah.
We haven't done that. We've actually said, we could learn something.
Yeah.
And though it is common in our day to have institutional or movement collapse, for lack of a better term, we could actually try to build something differently.
Yeah.
And I think that is challenging within our day. As we'll get into, it's very important. Central to any tribe is going to be leadership.
Yeah.
Even this concept, though, of tribe, this is not how a lot of people have thought. Like, if you read Tim Keller, for example, on the church, they're actually anti-tribal.
Yeah, it's funny.
This
Tribal
is part
is a
of
bad word.
Tribalism and nationalism are seen as bad things that you shouldn't want to pursue. And here we are saying, no, tribe is everything.
Tribe is absolutely everything. You need a tribe. You should be building tribes. You should notice that God made the world to operate and function in tribes and clans and gangs of men and in groups and small communities. Like, people do this dumb thing in churches, or any community, but it's prevalent in churches, where they say, I came to this church, but it was just full of cliques. And like, there is such thing as a sinful cliquishness where nobody can get in. It's impermeable. No new people, no friends can come in. It's inner rings. It's Lewis. There's a lot of bad dynamics that really can be described in that language. What I discovered, though, as a pastor in the last decade and a half, is that often when people say there's cliques, what they mean is there are groups of people that genuinely like each other in this church. and they all tend to share some interest or thing that they love. And I don't seem to be in that group.
I don't fit. And so now I'm kind of bitter about
mad,
that.
You know, like all these guys get together and, you know, they love to hang out and, you know, play golf or smoke cigars or talk about, you know, sports or like all this stuff. And they're like, no, the church needs to like establish this order where anybody can be in any group of friends and anybody can be in any, well, but no, that's not how God made the world.
Yeah,
that's how friendship works.
I think even in the Constitution, this is why we have the freedom of assembly.
Yeah.
Right? That it's noticing something in nature that groups will naturally form. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we will talk about is, you know, what is the right way that they form? I would argue it's around courage, competence, loyalty.
Yes.
That sort of thing. Not just an empty bureaucracy that's formed, you know, through DEI or forced integration of some kind.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to highlight is the book. I know people on video will be able to see this. This is The Boys in the Boat. Mm-hmm. And if you can see that title, I paid a whopping $1.50 from Deseret Industries for this book.
Wow, dang.
Mint condition. You got photos. I mean, come on.
Dude, look, there's a Hitler photo on that.
We got Hitler photos
from
in
the
here.
36 Olympics.
The 36 Olympics. It is interesting in the book. They talk actually about how beautiful Germany was. Mm-hmm. And like they went there and they were expecting, you know, this is pre-war.
Yeah.
So they're expecting, you know, an Olympic stage. But I think most of the men were just shocked because they came from Depression era America. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Seattle wasn't a tech hub or Starbucks hub yet.
No.
It was kind of like a dirty logging town.
Oh, it was a absolute dangerous place to live.
Yeah. And so here they go to Germany and they're like, it's like pristine.
Yeah.
And they put a lot of money into it and built just amazing stuff there. So that's kind of interesting. But the book, we were talking about this offline, but it was interesting. We were talking about tribal leadership. Mm-hmm. We're talking about how to cultivate leaders. And I have this practice where I just start in the evenings. I'd actually heard you say you did it.
Yeah, I love to do this as well.
I'll go walk 4 or 5 miles in the neighborhood and just listen to Audible. And so encourage people to check out the book. If you have a Spotify membership, it's actually, the book is free right now.
Nice.
So I saw it on there. I watched the movie. It's really good. And started listening to it. And it was funny as they're going through it and Pocock is talking in the book, I'm like having just this flash of like, this is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like this is perfect. But I want to talk in specific about this pursuit of an ideal. Mm-hmm. I think most people who are on a team like this, it's a very rare thing. First of all, championship teams are rare, or championship endeavors, we might say for our sakes. But when you're on a team like this, at some point there is a moment where you recognize, wow, we are a part of something special. Mm-hmm. If you're on the Bulls, part of it is we have an insane level of competence, but it's also the way the parts fit together. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, if you took a Scottie Pippen and you put him on a different team, he played for other teams. He wasn't all that good by himself, but he just fit perfectly in Phil's system.
Yeah.
And previously Tex Winter and the triangle offense, he fit in the system and everybody learned how to play their part. But as you think about these tribes coming together, I guess one of my questions is, why is this so rare today?
Yeah.
That you find a group of men working on a project. We were sitting in the elder meeting the other day talking about this. I think Kevin Griffin said, we are just so lucky. God has been so kind to us. Most people will never get to experience this.
Yeah.
But just explain, like, from your perspective, why that's so important and rare.
Yeah, I mean, there are levels to it. One of them is competence. Competence is rare. And especially competence is rare in a dysfunctional age, when we have institutions that are not producing a high level of competence on the average, that are calling the average up to high productivity and fruitfulness. And we certainly don't have that on the whole in our nation right now. The state of public schooling, the state of our cultural forming mechanisms are not creating a generally competent culture, but a generally incompetent culture. So when you have a generally competent culture, there's those people who are even like a top 5 or 10%. And again, God gives gifts unequally. God is the one who did that. God loves to say, this guy's going to get 10 talents. This guy's going to get 5. This guy's going to get 1. That's God did that.
Yeah.
We have to embrace and love that. So in a system that's generally producing competence, the 10 talent guys rise very high. The 5 talent guys rise way higher than they should. 1 talent, like everybody rises up. But in our culture, we have the opposite, where our general mode of life and enculturation and education does not produce on the average or aggregate competence. So it makes it more rare then to find above average teams. One thing that does happen, though, is that truly above average teams tend to rise meteorically in that culture.
Yeah.
Because there's such a vacuum of leadership and of competence that you do have situations where like a super elite rises. I think of a guy like Elon Musk as one of these types of people. I think he does well given his wiring and gifting wherever he goes. But that's a guy who he's going to rise. But in a day of little competence, like look at the way the U.S. government manages space exploration and rocketry. A guy like Elon Musk looks at that and says there's a lot of incompetence, inefficiency. They're spending way too much to do too little. And he goes, I can do 5 times more for half the cost. And then he steps up and he does it.
What is interesting, like you said, even take something like DEI, the initiatives that come out of the civil rights era really functionally. But you look at how that would even interplay in the church. You have Matt Chandler saying, I would actually rather hire the less competent black person than the more competent white person. Well, that's, Jeremy Carl's talked about this too, with the unprotected class.
Yep.
You have the elevation of people who are less qualified as a systematized process.
The purpose of a system is what it does. And so when you look at the purpose of DEI is to create incompetence, to erode trust, to deracinate society. That's the purpose of the system. That's what it does. So competence is a huge part of this, but there's far more than that. Competence is one piece. I think another reason that that leadership and hierarchy and organization in general are so difficult is because it requires 2 things that seem to tug at tension with one another. But you need both of them, and you cannot do it without both. One of them is men of competence and character who look at a problem or a thing or an office or leadership or a system or a people or a nation or a city or a clan or whatever, and they say, that needs leadership. I have been given the gifts to lead it, and I should go put my hand to the wheel and lead. Absolutely. And I'm the right guy to do this, and I know what needs to be done. That kind of courageous conviction, even if 10 people told a guy like that, you're wrong, this is wrong, this is how we've always done things, this is how the bureaucracy works. You need a guy who's like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I am 100% certain that I'm the guy to do this right now.
Yeah.
Okay, you need that. And this guy that's like, no. Everyone's saying this can't be done. It can be done.
There's a certain amount of will that's required.
Like a will and a conviction and a courage. And at the same time, the other thing you need is humility, mutual submission. You need a non-egotistical execution of a mission that God gives that is for the good of the people, not just the glory of the guy who has that conviction.
Well, this was one of the shocking insights, I think, that we have this stereotype from movies about what the good leader, say in a business. Business has been, uniquely in the 20th century with guys like John D. Rockefeller, the focal point became leaders as business guys. Yeah. So in the past, that actually wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. I think it's just American consumerism that would tend to elevate the business leader. But it is interesting. You get into like Good to Great with Jim Collins talking about business leaders who are the 10X builders of a generation. And he said the best leaders, this is one of their keystone findings, the best leaders were humble and self-effacing, yet incredibly strong-willed.
Absolutely strong-willed. They knew how to do a thing, and they would not settle for that thing not being done the way that they had the vision to do it and the competence to do it. But at the same time, the best leaders, the ones who were loved and remembered and did great, you're right. They were also, I think of Ford, Henry Ford.
Yeah.
What were some of his primary concerns? It wasn't creating the most value for the shareholders. It wasn't just amassing the greatest amount of wealth for himself, though he did produce huge value for himself and others, and stakeholders in the business. He was very concerned with creating a kind of culture where everybody who worked for him would be well taken care of, that they would love their job, that they would get paid well to do it, that they would work a human amount and they would have leisure, that his products would be excellent and would serve people.
Didn't even get sued for paying his workers so much. Like the competition was like, he's paying too much.
Yeah, there were multiple vectors of attack in Henry Ford's life against his iron-willed determination to pay his people well and to actually build a culture that was about what I would say the moral law of loving your neighbor.
Yeah.
Truly loving your neighbor. And not just stripping the most value out of your neighbor and then discarding your neighbor and finding a new neighbor that you can strip the most value from at the lowest cost. So you need both those things. And another thing that plays into that, because it sounds like I'm just talking about this like really point key leader. You do need really key leaders. You need a king. You need a point guy. You need like leaders who are in charge genuinely. But you also need, within the whole hierarchy of an organization, the awareness that, like we said in the cold open, one guy cannot do it. And so you have to have a team of leaders that work together. But that team of leaders has to have, again, two things. They have to have total confidence in their area of competence, and they have to be really well suited to be like, I am on the right seat in this organization, and I am pushing the plow on something deeply meaningful and important, and I contribute to it in this way. But then they also need a humility that says, I'm not always right. I don't know everything. I don't have to be the number one guy. I can take a lower seat. I can, like that. There's this constant tension between that conviction, courage, competence, will, and humility, service of others, self-sacrifice, giving of yourself for others. And in the hierarchy, you need a lot of people who also recognize, I'm not a number one guy. Even where you are a number one guy needs to know, I'm not a number one guy in everything.
Right.
I'm not omnicompetent. Only God is omnicompetent. So there's going to be people I need around me, even if you're a number one guy of the number one thing, like you're the number one seat in an organization, you're in charge. That guy will do way better if he recognizes that he's not omnicompetent. And so raise up, enable, empower the right, humble, competent guys who are bought in on the vision of the team, and we, not I, but then actually trust their instinct. It's just, all of this is very hard. Like it's very, very tremendously hard.
Yeah, I think having, like you said, core tribal leaders who really do a lot of the driving of the bus. And I'm stealing from Jim Collins, the bus analogy. If you think of a company like a bus or a church or whatever your institution is, you do have guys driving. Mm-hmm. But one of the other roles that we found is so important is figuring out the seats on the bus. You get the right guys on the bus, but the right guys for that mission, for whatever direction you're trying to go. And then we do spend a lot of time saying, does this guy's job title and what he's tasked to do, does it fit his giftings?
Yeah.
One of the things that has been hard in that process is there are times where we have, it can be us, it can be other people, and we can say, like, these 3 tasks are on my plate and I'm not good at them. Mm-hmm. But hey, look over here, we have this other guy who's kind of sitting on the bench, and we could elevate him to a role where he could help more. And I'll give one example. Yeah. This last year, we were kind of going through a lot of these processes, and Headmaster Kevin Love was doing the school stuff, and he was giving me a lot of feedback about maybe how we could run meetings better, org charts for the church side, how we could be more productive and making sure that tasks are getting done, all this sort of thing. Yeah. And a lot of hours of conversation. Finally, I looked at Kevin and I said, Kevin, would you like to be like basically the ops manager of the elder team? And he's like, what do you mean? And so we just kind of said, let's chart out together your giftings and what you can contribute with. And Kevin is great. This is where you have a bold will to lead, but you also have humility. Mm-hmm. He said, okay, I'm great at these things, some of the administrative operations functions, and I'd love to help there and kind of be your right-hand man on the elder team. He said, here's the 5 things I'm not good at. Mm-hmm. Yep. Here's where utilizing me won't be the best. Mm-hmm. And that was really key, I think, as our organization has grown, we've had to build scale and hierarchies to match them. Whereas in the early days, it was first you and Dan, then it was you, Dan, and myself, Kevin Griffin, Kevin Love, but then the elder team expands.
Ben, Ethan.
The church has gone from 180 to like 450 in a couple years. You got Ben and Ethan on the team now. And so then you're saying, okay, well, Ethan is really good at training young men and equipping future leaders. So let's put him in charge of the training guild that'll be overseen, but that's his wheelhouse. So just a lot of internal, I bet most people have no idea what goes on internally.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're looking from the outside and you're like, oh, they produce content or they pastor. We see that.
Yeah.
Brian preaches. But there's so much more complexity to the tribe and the inner workings.
Yes. You have to figure out who should be in what seat. And what's very painful about this process is that this happens for both yourself, but for others. And I actually think it's equally painful in both directions. Because everybody, because they're not God and they're not omnicompetent, they're always finding aspects where they shouldn't be in charge. They shouldn't be doing something. Maybe they should be leading and overseeing some area, but they're not actually the executor of that thing. They don't see it through themselves. And there is a pain there. It's humility. It's where you're actually admitting, I'm not God. And then giving something to somebody else, and you're pulling someone up in that process. That's very painful personally. And it sounds not that painful when you describe it there, but think about the feeling of having something taken away from you when other people around you say, hey, you're actually not that good at this thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times this doesn't come through just sober self-reflection all by yourself. It comes from people around you saying, hey, we've had this problem 10 times in the last year at the organization, at the church or whatever it is. And, it seems like every single time it actually traces back to fundamentally that you're in charge of something you shouldn't be, or in a way that you shouldn't be. And this other person might be way better at it. They should be doing that, not you. A lot of times that's how this comes into your own self-reflection.
Well, and a lot of times the task, I know this can be true for myself, the task becomes so wrapped up in how you view your identity.
Yes.
That to give up parts of it. I remember having this discussion with Ethan where I was like, well, I'll oversee the guild and I'll really be, kind of hands-on, giving it direction. And then Ethan came and he presented me with like this, it's Ethan. So it's like a 10-page thorough outline of the guild, and there was curriculum, and this is what we've been doing. And in that moment, like somebody in the meeting, I can't remember who, said, I think Ethan's competent to handle this one on his own.
We should put Ethan in charge of it.
But that moment, it was good and it was humbling, but you're right. There's also pain in it because you have to realize, hey, somebody else is probably better suited for this task than I am right now.
Yeah. And people are saying
that's okay.
about you. And it's like, oh, they're saying I suck. They're, like what the flesh wants to do is say, no, I'm great. I can do this. Maybe, I let it slip a little bit, but I need to go I can grab the reins again. It's like you're losing a part of your self-image where you have a perception of yourself, your competencies, gifts, greatness, excellencies, wonderfulness, all of this. And then other people are rudely intruding upon that by trying to bring your self-image into alignment with this very difficult, painful thing called reality.
Well, it's so interesting. There's a parallel in The Boys in the Boat where you have, I forget his name, but the guy at the front who faces them and calls cadence.
The cadence, yeah.
At one point, they had one guy doing it, and the team was just not bonding. It just wasn't working. And then finally, the coach was like, get out of the boat. And the guy's like, what? Because he was like the varsity, like he should have been. He was the guy. On paper, he looked like the guy who could do it. And then they take the guy who's like mopping floors, but had kind of been a troubled guy, but the guys loved him. And they put him in the front seat and they say, okay, you call cadence. Oof. And he called cadence and they rode like they never rode before.
Dude, you know how painful it is for that guy, that varsity guy?
Yeah, and he's sitting there. He's not a bad guy.
Yeah.
He put in all the work with everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think this is part of leadership and coaching too is, we'll get more into it, but you cannot be conflict averse.
No.
I would say one of the core competencies of a leader as we look for future leaders, I'm looking for the guys who, when a building is on fire, everyone else is running away and he's running in.
Yeah.
How do I have a hard conversation like 20 times a day?
Yeah.
How do I'm looking for that guy who can bring order to chaos in whatever his realm is. Like he knows how to be a stable presence to go in and to just order things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be, I mean, we start seeing them more and more through experience on the team, but if we have a tough doctrinal thing that needs to be worked out through a rigorous, like 10-page document, my first thought at this point is like, Ben Garrett would be really good at this.
He would really enjoy doing it.
He would love it. He's good at it. In fact, we'll have to say not 20,000 words.
Yeah, and we have to
10.
say like, no, not in a month. Like, do it in a quarter because you need to do other things. Like,
he'll be super passionate about it.
The other side of it that's really hard. So there's that self-reflection where you're learning more about yourself, and some of it is good. Some of it is like others noticing and saying, "Hey, you're really good at this." And that feels good. Like, it's good when someone says, "You're really good at this." We enjoy that. And then it's painful when people say, "And you know what though, but you're not really good at this and this guy is." So getting on the right seat. But what's hard, in some ways, I think this is the harder task, and it is the rarer competency. You don't find many of these types of leaders, but it is one of the quintessence unknown of leadership, is the coach who can look at the boat and say to the varsity guy, "You shouldn't be in that seat of calling cadence. It should be this guy that's the junior or the lower guy." And so there's also maybe even more painful is that muscle of leadership of telling other people things they don't want to hear and creating order from chaos and dysfunction, or even creating greater order from less order.
Yeah.
It's not that everything has to be terrible and then you order everything, but it's really like, this is one of the hardest aspects of leadership. It is not just people going into conflict outside of the leadership team, and you certainly need to do that in a church or any organization, but also people saying in the midst of the leadership team, the people in the front of the bus, directing others, and saying, "You two need to switch seats. You need to step down. You need to step up. This isn't working over here. Organization grew, it outgrew your competence. You need to submit to a lower seat. We need another guy in that seat." Think of how difficult that is, because really good teams are good friends. Really good teams develop relationships that are years deep and thick and good. And it's like, so there's this mutual danger in that relationship where the leader can shrink from doing the things that must be done in an organization because of loyalty, because he loved out of love and loyalty, he could actually fail to love and truly be loyal out of love and loyalty. And then on the receiving end of that, it's back to that deep pain of realizing I'm not this. I thought I had 10 talents. I have 4. That hurts.
My passion is art design.
Yeah, it'd be like if Eric was like, I was walking last night and listening to a book on graphic design. I wrote a cold open for it, for the next episode. And guys, I think I need to be the art director for New Christendom Press.
They're actually, and early on, it's funny as the relationships, but also the organization changes. Because, when we started New Christendom Press, we didn't have staff.
No.
We were the staff. So Brian and I would argue about graphic design. And finally, I did have that realization, this is not my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
In the same way that if you asked me to go lead worship singing, it would be we have many other people who are gifted at this. I'm not super great. And
it's funny.
And that's okay.
It's so in the other direction too. It's so this is one of the things that we come to you and we show you a meal, like a finished meal. That's an episode of the King's Hall.
Yeah.
But some of the meals took 3 years to make.
Yeah.
So this is an example of that. This episode is an example of that. Everything that we just talked about, the pain of this, of learning this about yourself, of saying this about others.
We've lived through that.
Guys, you don't, until you've done it, other leaders understand, the pain of this process. But do you know how difficult it has been for two men who are absolutely certain of their own convictions and correctness of what to do in an organization and vision and all these things. I'm talking about me and Eric, figuring out how to work together to where today I have no doubt about the gifts that you have. Like I know I could list them. I could explain Eric's gifting, maybe better than Eric. I don't know. Say, this is what Eric's really good at. In the organizations, this is what I need him to do. He's got to do this or no one else is going to be able to do it as good as he can. And so, and also that took years. And then on the other hand, one of the painful parts about that is that all of those things, or nearly all of those things, correspond to areas that I am not very good at, but had been in charge of for a long time.
Yeah.
In one way or the other. So there's like, here's the finished meal, but do you know what this took? It took 3 years where like for two of them, we were probably both like, what is wrong with this guy? Like he is an idiot.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you every one of those lessons was learned in sort of the heat and furnace of conflict. And some of the conflicts, I mean, we're still working together and we're still figuring stuff out. But yeah, you could have a month or two where you're like, I just am so confused by the way Brian sees the world. I have no idea what's going on here. But I do think one thing that happens...
It's confusing.
Well, I guess I would say one thing that's required for all this to work that a lot of people don't have is the element of time.
Yeah.
So one thing that's really helped is we've all kind of said we burn the boats. Mm-hmm. We're here for life.
Yep.
And there's been many moments where you and I, Dan, anyone on the team, we've said, hey, this is really tough. I don't see a way through it.
Yeah.
But we're all committed. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So we have to figure it out.
Yep. Whatever seat, whatever place I need to be in whatever season, I'm here.
Yeah. So that element of time, I just think if you're in companies, particularly where you're moving every 2 years, it's not even possible to gel as a team in the way that I think we have. Kind of interesting parallel. This is why Phil Jackson got out of coaching, was because the end of his dynasty with the Lakers was the beginning of free agency. And when they did kind of through a lot of the collective bargaining and then free agency, you simply salary cap, you could not keep a team together. And so he was like, I'm just not interested anymore.
Yeah.
If all I have is players for a year or two, you're going to pour in all that work and then they leave.
And some of it makes certain aspects of it easier. When you're leading a group and you're looking out at 15 employees you manage and you see 3 of them that need to be fired, you're like, hey, Bill, Joe, whatever, come into my office. You're fired. Here's your severance package, whatever.
Right.
Cool. It's a business. People expect that. But when it's something more, when it's a community and it's people you love,
people are not disposable objects.
No, that it ups the ante of what you can accomplish over time because there's true love and loyalty built in. It's human. It's actually better. But it also ups the difficulty because now there's more obstacles to the leadership process of self-understanding and also team understanding in that process of deploying the right people to the right roles.
Yeah, I think that's really good. One other thing you and I are kind of talking about is our roles on the team, in particular, senior pastor, executive pastor, how that stuff works. What's interesting to me is that there's distinction, even though it's a good task to do, but we recently went through like Myers-Briggs surveys, like figuring out a little bit more like who each other are as teammates and stuff like that. One of the things I had to laugh at is that we were both ENTJs.
We were like identical.
And now they have a new one. It's ENTJA. So these are typically known as life's natural leaders, life's assertive leaders, or as Mark Driscoll once said, the ENTJ is basically a JERK. But
he had a way with words.
He did have a way with words.
I think he's speaking from self-understanding.
But it is interesting. We were looking through and the Myers-Briggs, this is not like to toot our own horn, but Myers-Briggs said like the ENTJs, it's like one of the rarest personality types, which makes sense in God's hierarchical world. If you had, can you imagine a whole church full of us?
We'd be say all the time. If there was just all me or all Eric, it'd be like the worst place to be.
We would probably kill each other.
Well, there wouldn't be many after a time.
But I think
because of the bloodshed.
Yeah, because of the bloodshed.
This
is an interesting thing, though. I think most organizations, and all the stuff that I've read on C-suite stuff and on the business side, most organizations cannot tolerate having 2 people of that personality near each other at the top.
It's funny.
And yet here we are. I want to kind of speak to something you said about recognizing the differentiation in gifts, because you could say, okay, so you're the same person. Not at all. I think, Brian, you are much more focused on outward communication. You do the bulk of the preaching. You have a unique role in shaping and communicating the vision of the church. I think even because of the preaching, but also just the dynamic of your family, it's a cultural driving engine of the culture of the church in terms of joyfulness, household. Bright Hearth plays a big role in this. The stuff that I do, like we were looking at, how do we spend most of our time? And I think on the team, I think I had the highest percentage spent in meetings.
Right.
And we were talking about this the other day, and it's like, well, yeah, because a lot of that time is coaching, it's having hard conversations, it's working with guys in both organizations, trying to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
We're talking about hiring, training, guilds, all sorts of stuff like that. So I guess just speak to how those things could work together, even with so much distinction.
Yes. So it is true that often if you had two people who were as similar in wiring as you and I, particularly because that thing I said earlier about the high conviction that you're correct about a thing, that's the way our egalitarian culture reads that is pride. Intrinsically, that's pride.
Yeah.
That's actually not the case. If you don't have people like that, God made the world with some people who are like that, who are able to look at a thing and parse it out neutral, like without emotion, and to order it, to say, this should be like this person should be here. That's a lot of vision, leadership, like communication. That rule is another word that's very key to that. That's a good thing. It can go wrong and certainly become highly corrupted by pride. So when you have a couple people, two people we both have that kind of gear or certitude about that, what you can, if there's not over time corresponding humility, self-reflection in both directions, both people doing that and learning about the other and developing trust and loyalty to saying, I know this about myself. I have this kind of certitude, but part of my certitude over time becomes, I am certain that Eric is better at this than me. I am just as convinced about that as I am about other things. That takes time and humility and to develop in both directions. And likewise, like Eric's saying, I'm certain that Brian's good at this and he should do this. If we were identical in every way, though, it wouldn't work. I don't think God deploys people that way because he tends to put, like, is the body all mouth? Is the body all nose? Is the body all hand? It's not. The body's many members, and that's true of the whole thing, but it's also true of its expression and local instantiate, like of local expressions of the body universal. You have a mouth and eyes and hands in each congregation over time. I think the Lord's faithful to do that, and he deploys his troops in that manner. But when it comes to specialization amongst the roles, the secret sauce is really in figuring out, again, how to keep in tension those two things. I'm certain about this, and that can even include your own gifting as a leader. I'm certain that this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm certain what they're supposed to do. And so we can now work together and figure out how to rule and lead in these different things so that order and beauty and life comes out of it. And it means figuring out very practical things, like it's success if Eric spends a lot more time in meetings than me, because a lot of Eric's gifting is in that management, ordering, leading of people in that kind of context, particularly on the leadership level of the church, like leading leaders, going and having a meeting with this leader. And, before we come to any kind of major decision as a church or as an elder team or as New Christian Press staff, you will have found, when it's done well, that Eric has spent about 15 times more time than anybody else on it, because he's been talking to everybody, figuring out what everybody thinks about something, building consensus, coming to this perspective from this team member and this perspective from this team member could really come together and create this vision for this change. And so by the time you come together in a table of we need to make a call, everybody actually has a pretty deep awareness of what needs to happen, of where everybody else is at. And it's because Eric is good at leading in that way. But at the same time, if I spent my time like that, it would be a bad thing. I'm not very good at it, number one. I'm figuring out why, as I work with Eric, why I'm not very good at it, deficiencies in my own gifting, but also because I would then not be doing the thing that I am good at, which is that if I'm actually really failing the church and the school and New Christendom Press, if I am not spending a significant amount of my time with my head down, writing, thinking, producing, preparing.
Yeah, because the communication is part of leadership too. It is interesting. I think you could see the difference in both of us simply by the posture of our doors.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing the thing that you're supposed to do, your door's closed.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to do, generally speaking, my door is open 24/7. I mean, it's, there's phone calls on the ride home. There's early morning meetings. There's
constant.
Yeah. And one thing I would say that I've learned over the years from older, wiser pastors, especially in organization and management on eldership teams, that you mentioned, was the need to realize when you go to an elder meeting and you have to have the discussion, you have to make it. Let me say this: you have to make a decision.
Yeah,
that is not the first time you've talked about that issue.
Shouldn't be.
The amount of diplomacy, negotiation, bouncing ideas back and forth. Generally, as a leader, you need to know where you're going, and that's something that we talk about. What are we trying to accomplish? Where do we need to go? But then that process of going and getting feedback, addressing objections.
Yeah.
Well, what about this? If we change this, then would you be more on board with this?
Yeah.
If we alleviate these fears, concerns, whatever desires that you have for whatever initiative we're trying to accomplish. So that a lot of times, by the time, like you said, by the time you come to the meeting, people are like, wow, we're all on the same page. This is great. Let's move forward. There's harmony. And you might be misled in thinking that like that just naturally happened.
It just happened. No. A leader led really well and put a lot of work into that harmony. It's like a conductor of an orchestra. He works with the brass section, and then he works with the strings, and he works with the rhythm section over here, and he gets coupled together, and they workshop, and he gets key people from the violins together, and hey, let's make sure we tighten up that part and tell them this. And then they get together, and they practice as a whole thing, and then they perform as a whole thing. But there was an enormous amount of special work. I played competitive soccer in my teens, and I was a goalkeeper. And a goalkeeper's a weird position in the sport. Like, you use your hands. You don't get to leave your box. Like, it's a weird position. You don't wear the same shirt. It's just, you have gloves on. And we had separate, like, we'd have practices with the team, but in my organization, we had a goalkeeper coach, and he was a former World Cup goalkeeper. He had played World Cup level, and that's all he did. And his role in our team was to coach the two goalkeepers, me and another guy. And that was it. So we got together and we did our own stuff, and then we practiced with the team. And then lo and behold, the team works together way better when you've done that. And it's like the way I think about it is that Eric's type of leadership, gifting, wiring, calling, charge in the church, seat on the bus, is that he's doing that and having a lot of meetings with smaller groups. And part of it is so that I can have one meeting with 450 people and preach or teach something else or write something and have a meeting with 1,000 people. And the reality is, if Eric isn't doing that, I cannot do what I need to do in the organization. And if I'm not doing what I need to do, Eric can't do that. So the dynamic you find, and maybe we could circle here, what we're talking about sounds very corporate, and people are like, what about plurality of elders? What about mutual submission? What about all these things? But hang on. One of the deep principles of leadership that we discover, not just in nature, but also in Scripture, is the variegation of leadership and the types of leadership. And each of those types of leaders interact with people differently. They interact with them in different numbers, and the work looks different. You see this in Exodus 18. Exodus 18, when Jethro comes to Moses and he says, Moses, what you're doing is not good. What is Moses doing? Well, Moses has a line out his door from this nation of 1 million people that he's leading, and he's trying to individually judge, basically counsel, all 1 million of them himself. And he's like, well, there you could see how the temptation might arise. I'm failing the people if I don't love them by meeting with each of them individually. I'm not doing a good job. I need to hear them. I need to serve them. I need to make this ruling. God has appointed me as the leader. Jethro says, what you're doing is not good. And what he was missing is that God had actually already created in that nation of a million plus many, many other leaders, chieftains that were waiting for Moses, the leader, to call up. And Jethro gave this insight that this should forge a lot of how we think of all leadership. He said God gave some to rule over tens, and some over 50s, and some over hundreds, and some over thousands. So you need to go find those people and deploy them properly.
I also think this is interesting because in Genesis, when God makes everything, there's all this differentiation, distinction. You have the day, the night, the sea, the land. Everything is in its proper place and proper order. And at the very end, God says, and it was very good. And then you have the reverse to Moses from Jethro, when there's chaos and there's no hierarchy, no distinction. And he says, this is not good.
He flattens it all out. He's missed. Now, a light bulb went off in my mind as we were wrestling on this, even as an elder team and different things like, as our church grows, or even in New Christendom Press, you say, you need increasing specialization in leadership. And it was like, is this businessy? Is this wrong? Is this anti-biblical or anything like that? And we went back to Exodus 18. And the light bulb was, does the leader over 1,000 interact with those 1,000 people the same way that a leader over 10 interacts with those 10?
Oh.
And it was like, they actually can't. Why not? Because they're not God. The leader over 1,000, it's not to gas up the guy over 1,000. It's actually a limitation that he has. He's not omnipresent. God can meet with 1,000 people in exactly the same way. A human being can't. So the leader over 10s, by the nature of his place, he is going to work much more one-on-one with those 10 people. This is like a father in a household level of leadership. That's the leader over 10s. Or maybe it's a leader of a small clan where the heads of there's 10 households and all of the heads of households get together. And there's one guy that's kind of the point leader of those 10. Well, he can know the opinion of all 10 of them. He can have a meeting in a month with all 10 of them. He can have lunch with all 10 of them. He can be in the house of all 10 of them. The second you get to a leader over 50, 100, or 1,000, it's no longer possible for that leader to even meet with all 1,000 of them the same way.
No.
And so if you require as a principle of your leadership that all leaders interact with the people they're leading in an identical way, you're actually claiming that those leaders over thousands that God, and God made, by the way, leaders over millions, like Moses. Moses was leader over millions. You're actually saying, oh, that leader is like God. He can meet with everybody. In humility, that leader has to recognize, I can't do that. I have to actually lead as a leader over 1,000 or 10,000 or 500 or whatever it is. I actually have to lead through mediators. I have to lead through teams. I have to lead through other leaders.
Yeah, so we're kind of discovering that there's different kinds and different levels of leadership that's required.
Yeah.
And I think particularly in growing organizations, you have to face that reality of scale.
Yep.
And as you do that, I think one of the things you realize, just quite naturally, there's guys, we have deacons in the church. They're great. I would call them like sergeants. They know the people well. They're in the camp with multiple families. And then those people will come to us and say, hey, here's 3 trends we see.
Yep.
And then a lot of what my job is interfacing with you and saying like, okay, what are the different levels that we could address that as a body?
Yeah.
But I can't go and meet with every single family who has an issue and provide, weekly counseling for each one of them.
No, it wouldn't actually be, even in a church of 150, a pastor by himself would have a very hard time meeting with all 150 people in any kind of consistent basis if you just start looking at the hours in a day.
Yeah, one of the other things I think with scale, if you look at our eldership team, I'd say you have kind of a radical concentration of competence. Meaning, like, if you look at somebody like, for a while, Kevin Love was one of the newer elders. But then I'm like, in most small churches in America or many churches, like Kevin would probably be the lead pastor. And then you look at like Ben and Ethan, they're, much newer to the elder team. But I look at them and I think they could probably pastor a church. But it's unique when you get them all together. And then it's kind of a grace too, because I think this is why a lot of smaller church pastors just feel this pinch, because you're basically asked to do everything. Even though it's a smaller group of people, you're asked to do everything really well.
Yeah.
And it was kind of drilled in our minds in seminary that like the competent leader can do it all. But there was another ditch too, I think, outside of competence, where you would have one leader who was like not necessarily competent at everything in leadership, but very charismatic. And what he would do is he would accrue around himself mid to low level manager type guys, rubber stampers, guys who, really towed the company line well.
Yeah.
Wouldn't push back on him.
Yeah.
And what you ended up with were really mediocre movements, institutions, and organizations.
And they look like a hyper exaggeration of the strength of that one charismatic leader.
Like high loyalty.
Yeah. And a hyper exaggeration of his weaknesses and deficiencies.
So I think I almost want to say that was kind of a feature of boomer style leadership.
Yeah.
It kind of worked maybe in the old world, but I think people are starting to drift back to things that are actually more, like even think about David and his mighty men. I think this is written in nature. David didn't run all the mighty men in exactly the same way that they, you have divisions. There's the one, there's the three, there's different levels of commander. And there's a reason even modern militaries have copied that tiered structure of hierarchy. It's very efficient. The Roman Empire did this.
The Lord Jesus.
And it wasn't a new thing.
He had Peter, he had the 3, he had the 12, he had the 72. Goes out.
Yeah, so really helpful. One of the books, Brian, that we'll talk about a little bit more is Tribal Leadership. This concept of learning the we over the me has been, I think, a painful process at points. I'll give one example. Just when I was in Colorado, I had Hard Men Podcast, started that, had a small following, but there were more people who were saying like, yeah, I'm really interested in what you're saying. But I was sort of looking at the culture, society, and particularly the church. And I was saying, I don't think that me as an individual can change all this. We're talking about tribe, but I don't have one. And we're talking about building a great culture, but, I haven't really experienced that myself. And just in conversations with you and Dan, it was challenging to have to say, if I want to do anything great, any lasting legacy changing work, it's going to have to be a part of a team.
Yeah.
And so, look, there are a lot of people who will tell you this. The only ship that doesn't sail is a partnership, right? There's all these warnings, like just be a sole proprietor. It's so much easier. Or just be that individual pastor. Build your entire organization with mid-level managers who just say yes, and you won't have conflict. Two things are, I think, problematic with this. Number one, you can't achieve very much. Dan had this saying, it was something like, it's an old slogan, but it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to build long, go together. Like you're going to need a team for these. So that's kind of one of the problems. But then the other one I would say is a lot of these organizations where they built it with one key personality and a bunch of mid-level managers around him, they still have conflict. They still fall apart. You don't actually avoid the thing that you're claiming that you're going to avoid.
It's just easier to fire people.
Yeah.
Because you can do it alone. You can do it with sole discretion.
Correct.
But a lot of the time we can, there's the temptation could be to fire away things that actually would have helped you.
Yeah.
Because you don't like them because they're unpleasant.
Pushback.
Yeah. So you can fire away. This is particularly dangerous for pastors because of a businessman can succeed in business and be fairly immoral and still make a lot of money. And so the business succeeded kind of in the way in what a business is for. Well, maybe it serves the customers pretty decently and whatnot. But a pastor who builds an organization such that he's insulated from all criticism or help, and just immediately shuts down anybody who might threaten his self-conception, he's really guaranteeing that he will experience the much greater pain of either the Lord's displeasure or total failure. Because it just doesn't work. That's not how God made the church to function. He's going to bring shame on the church. He's going to bring shame on himself. he's ultimately going to disobey God and put himself in the way of God's displeasure. You actually can't. Like you cannot do that. And so if you're that, no matter where you are in this, like I think a lot of pastors listen to this, one place to start, if you're like, what do I do? Where do I start? Is that you really need to start looking around and saying, who are those leaders of tens? Because God is faithful. He doesn't bring together 500 people in a church or 100 people in church, and literally there's only one guy that can do anything. That's just not how the Lord works. Go find the leader of 5, go find the leader of 10, find the leader of 50, and start to pour into raising them up in leadership and giving them opportunity and training them and having hard conversations and doing all of that. And also listen to them and learn more about yourself, your weaknesses, deficiencies, needs.
Yeah, I also think this is true in a lot of, especially smaller churches at local levels. Maybe you feel kind of isolated, but it's the mistake of just elevating somebody because they're there, not necessarily because they fit a qualification. So one thing I would always tell guys is, look, the thing that you're talking about is pursuing greatness together, and you're doing something that is in rarefied air. Mm-hmm. So you shouldn't expect that everybody whom you have a conversation with is the guy to do it with.
Yeah, or going to be a leader.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe it looks good on paper, but it is going to, just like finding your tribe, like it's really hard.
Yeah.
But I guess I would just say it's worth the effort.
We said small front door for the borough, small front door for leadership.
Way smaller.
It's like this big. Can you fit through this hole?
You got to be very selective.
You got to be very, very selective with leadership. Slow to elevate, slow to lay hands on, and even quicker to deal with problems, because they will have huge multiplied effects in the people.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with them. Yeah. So we need a small front door. We've talked a lot in this episode. I think we're actually going to need to do a 2-part on this because of the time. Looking at it, I want to do it justice. So maybe we can land the plane relatively soon here and just say this episode, we've talked a lot about team dynamics. We've talked about some of those things keeping in tension in teams, the absolute conviction to lead and the humility to know yourself accurately. And then also the courage to help other people learn to view themselves accurately and get on the right seat in the bus. This stuff is so huge and it's not often talked about. Especially in church leadership, because there's so many landmines where you can be misunderstood. I think people are scared to talk about these things.
Well, I think the other part of it is that, just like the boys in the boat, right? That you have, think about the insane amount of discipline and hard work that goes in to get to experience that moment, like that magical team moment of we're doing great stuff. And I think that a lot of people just aren't, it's maybe like working out. You start doing some of the hard disciplines, you say, this is really hard.
Yep.
Didn't produce what I wanted. But just telling people it's going to take years of the hard disciplines to get everybody rowing, because that's a lot of seat changes. Yep. That's a lot of honing people's skills and sharpening and changing a little bit of job descriptions and stuff like that. But it's if you could just get people to the point where in weightlifting, like you could look in the mirror and say, whoa, I'm 9% body fat. This actually feels good.
Yeah. I
can the first workout.
As a 9% body fat guy,
yes.
I can really identify with that. Yeah,
I'm actually 12.
Yeah, I mean,
times a few, but I think just getting people the buy-in that this is so important if you want to do great work. One of the things we'll do, Brian, in the next episode is jump into really the core principles that are driving this, and then we'll talk more about the Leadership Guild and the particulars of like what we actually do.
Yeah, nuts and bolts, how we raise up leaders,
who we pick,
why we do it in-house, why it looks the way it does. Because people are really asking, okay, how do I do this? What's the next step? What can I do in my place? How does seminary play into this versus local training?
Yeah.
And I think we can explain pretty granularly why we do what we do. And
one of the things I would encourage people to, if you have questions about this content or last episode, we'd love to have those submitted. I think they can do that through the podcast channel.
Yeah, there's a send us a text button.
Send us a text. Now, we cannot actually text you back, but we do address these in the Patreon only after hours.
Yeah.
So definitely encourage you to do that. We'll be doing that after this, just talking more about some of those specific questions that you have about leadership, about your church, organization, whatever it is. So submit those. We'd love to answer them best we can.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, let me land the plane then. Just leave you guys with this encouragement. I know leadership can be really lonely. A lot of you guys are probably neck deep in a lot of the dynamics. You're like, oh, I know what you're talking about there. Yep, it's not just painful, it's currently painful. Like it's an open wound in my life right now trying to lead this thing. Remember that the Lord went before you in all of this. The Lord is the good shepherd, and he's also the head of his church. The Lord walked through this road. He was rejected by men. He dealt with every single thing that we just listed in the perfect and pure form sinlessly. And he did that because he loves you and he is your good shepherd. So leaders, don't forget in the course of leading that you are also, you are a son, you are the object of the Lord's affection. He's for you. You can do these hard things and not even stake your eternal hope on the success of them, because sometimes we fail. Sometimes it doesn't work. But the Lord is on your side. And he's using even this, like he's custom made every aspect of our life and the journey of our own leadership to bring us to glory. So if you're in the midst of a really hard season and you're looking at another leader and you're like, why are they killing it? Why is this working so well and it's not working for me? Just remember that even that is a part of the Lord's kindness for you as a leader. He is making you into the man that he wants you to be. And so he made your life to bring you there. So thanks for listening, guys. If you want to support the King's Hall, you can do so on our Patreon channel, links in the description, and also on our podcast channel. I don't think on YouTube, but on our podcast channel, you can hit that send us a text button. Send us your questions about this or any other topic, and we'd like to look through those and weave them into episodes and after hours on Patreon and that sort of thing. God bless you guys. We'll catch you next time in the King's Hall.